My name is Evan, and I'm 28 years old. A couple of years ago, my life took a sharp turn after a messy divorce that left me untethered emotionally and financially. With few options, I decided to leave the city behind and move to Chadam, a sleepy little town in Alabama, where the world seems to move at half speed. My parents' house was an option, sure, but I craved independence, a place to rebuild. That's when I remembered my grandfather's old house, a place he'd left to our family when he passed away a few years back. It was about 10 minutes outside of Chadam, perched on 10 acres of sprawling land, surrounded by dense woods that seemed to swallow the horizon. The isolation felt like a promise of peace, a chance to start over. I thought the quiet would be good for me. The house itself was a relic, a weathered two-story structure with sagging porches and a personality all its own. The wooden floors groaned under every step, the doors stuck stubbornly in their frames, and no matter how high I cranked the thermostat, a faint chill clung to the air, as if the house held on to the cold of its own history. It wasn't much, but it was free, a roof over my head, and I had nothing else. I spent the first few days settling in, unpacking boxes of clothes and books, scrubbing decades of dust from the furniture, and trying to make the place feel like mine. Evenings were spent on the front porch, a beer in hand, listening to the symphony of the countryside, the rustle of wind through the pines, the distant hoot of an owl, the soft hum of cicadas. It was the kind of quiet I hadn't known I needed, and for a while, it felt like I'd made the right choice. But that peace didn't last. On the 7th night, something shifted. I just climbed into bed, the old mattress creaking under my weight, and was teetering on the edge of sleep when a sound pulled me back. Whistling. It was faint at first, drifting in from the woods behind the house. A slow, uneven tune, off-key and aimless, like someone was wandering through the trees, whistling to pass the time. It wasn't a song I recognized, just a haunting, broken melody that set my nerves on edge. I lay there, eyes wide, heart thudding, trying to convince myself it was nothing, maybe a hunter passing through, or a neighbor who'd had one too many drinks and wandered too far from town. But the sound lingered, looping through the night air, and it felt wrong, too deliberate. I didn't sleep much that night, my mind replaying the tune until dawn. The next night, it happened again. Same time, around midnight, maybe a little after. The same jagged tune, but closer now, as if the whistler had stepped out of the woods and onto my property. I bolted upright, my pulse racing, and fumbled for the lamp on the nightstand. The light did little to calm me. I crept to the window, peering through the blinds, but the porch light cast only a weak glow, illuminating nothing but the edge of the yard. I grabbed a flashlight and, against my better judgment, stepped onto the porch. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. I swept the beam across the yard, the light catching on tree trunks and underbrush, but there was no one, no footprints in the soft dirt, no rustle of someone slipping away, just the whistling fading deeper into the woods like a taunt. I went back inside, locked the door, and double-checked every window, my hands shaking as I tugged at the latches. For the next few nights, I tried to ignore it. I'd lie in bed, eyes squeezed shut, willing myself to sleep through the sound. But every night, like clockwork, the whistling returned, always around 1:15 or 1:17 a.m. I started noting the time, checking my phone each time it began, as if documenting it would make it less real. It was maddening, the way it never deviated, the way it seemed to mock my attempts to dismiss it. I began to wonder if someone knew I was out here, alone, and was toying with me. The thought made my skin crawl. I wasn't a paranoid person, but the isolation of the house, once comforting, now felt like a trap. A few days later, I couldn't take it anymore. I called the sheriff's office, and an older deputy, who I'll call Deputy H, showed up in a battered patrol car. He was grizzled with deep lines etched into his face, and a slow, deliberate way of speaking that suggested he'd seen it all. I told him about the whistling, the timing, the way it seemed to get closer each night. He listened quietly, his expression unreadable, then said something that sent a chill down my spine. Your granddaddy used to call us about the same thing, whistling around the property, always in the spring. We'd come out, walk the land, but never found a thing. I figured he was just getting old, hearing things, but now you're hearing it too. My stomach dropped. My grandfather had never mentioned this to me, not once. I asked Deputy H if he had any theories, but he just shook his head, his eyes distant. Keep your doors locked, he said. Stay inside after dark, and don't go chasing noises in the woods. He left me with that, his words hanging heavy in the air. I took his advice seriously. I checked the locks twice, sometimes 3 times before bed. I started wedging chairs under the doorknobs, a trick I'd seen in movies but never thought I'd use. I stopped sitting on the porch at night, trading the open air for the claustrophobic safety of the house. But the whistling didn't stop. If anything, it grew bolder. One night, I heard it right behind the shed, no more than 20 feet from the house. It was louder than ever, the notes sharp and deliberate, like the whistler wanted me to know they were there. I grabbed my flashlight and peeked through the blinds, my breath catching in my throat. The yard was empty, the shed a dark silhouette against the trees. I didn't dare go outside. The next night, the whistling came from the front porch, right outside the door. 3 long, slow notes, then silence. I sat frozen on the couch, clutching a kitchen knife, too afraid to move. The night after that was the worst. I was in bed, staring at the ceiling, when the whistling started again. Not outside, but beneath the house. It was muffled, distorted, coming up through the floorboards, as if someone was in the crawl space, their breath pushing through the vents. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it might burst. I didn't sleep that night, sitting up with the lights on, listening to every creak and groan of the house, wondering if it was just the building settling or something far worse. The next morning, desperate for answers, I climbed into the attic, a cramped, musty space filled with boxes and cobwebs. I found a trunk of my grandfather's belongings, old photos, letters, and a stack of leather-bound journals. I sat cross-legged on the dusty floor, flipping through the pages. His handwriting was shaky but meticulous, and what I read made my blood run cold. For over a decade, every spring, he'd heard the whistling. He described it just as I had, a slow, off-key tune, always at night, always around 1:15 a.m. He wrote about sitting up with his rifle, convinced someone was watching the house. He noted that it only happened when he was alone, after my grandmother passed. I don't know who it is, he wrote in one entry, but they're out there, and they know I'm here. Another entry, dated years later, read, I saw a shadow by the shed last night, too tall to be an animal. It moved when I turned on the light. My hands trembled as I closed the journal. This wasn't just my imagination. Something or someone had been haunting this house for years. I called Deputy H again. He came by that afternoon, his face grim as he read the journals. This ain't good, Evan, he said, his voice low. "I don't know what's going on out here, but you need to be careful. Don had opened that door unless you are really sure who's on the other side." His words felt like a warning from another world, one where the rules of logic didn't apply. He left me with a number to call if anything else happened, but I could tell he was as unsettled as I was. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the living room couch, a shotgun across my lap. A gun I'd found in the attic, one I barely knew how to load, let alone fire. The house was silent, the kind of silence that feels like it's holding its breath. At exactly 1:17 a.m., the whistling started again, but this time it wasn't outside. It was inside, coming from the hallway. My heart stopped. The sound was slow, deliberate, moving closer with each note, accompanied by the soft creak of floorboards. I gripped the shotgun, my palms sweaty, and shouted, "Who's there?" The whistling cut off abruptly. I fumbled for the light switch, my hand shaking so badly I nearly dropped the gun. When the hallway light flickered on, it was empty. No one was there. The house was still, but the air felt heavy, like something had just slipped out of sight. For 2 days it was quiet. No whistling, no footsteps, no shadows. I started to hope it was over, that whatever or whoever it was had moved on. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the way the woods seemed to loom closer at night. On the third night, I went to bed just after midnight, exhausted but too wired to sleep deeply. I left the hallway light on, its dim glow a small comfort. At 1:17 a.m., I jolted awake to a new sound, not whistling, but knocking. 3 slow, deliberate knocks coming from the back door, inside the house. My blood ran cold. I lay still, straining to hear, when the floorboards creaked in the hallway, one step at a time. The hallway light went out with a soft click, plunging the house into darkness. I grabbed the shotgun and crept out of the bedroom, my bare feet cold against the floor. At the end of the hallway, I saw it. A figure, tall and dressed in black, their face pale and indistinct in the shadows. They stood perfectly still, watching me. My hand shook as I raised the gun, my voice barely a whisper as I shouted, "Don't move!" The figure shifted, lifting a leg as if to turn and run. "Stop!" I screamed, my voice cracking. They darted out of the hallway, their heavy footsteps pounding toward the front door. I ran after them, adrenaline flooding my system, and fired a shot into the darkness outside, the recoil jarring my shoulder. "Don't come back!" I yelled, my voice raw.